Oftentimes, success in business is just about finishing what you start. But most entrepreneurs have a hard time actually doing what they committed on doing. And this happens at all levels of business. So I've coached 7, 8, and even 9-figure entrepreneurs. They still had some of those projects and tasks that they dreaded so much that they didn't do them. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we started working together. So very high-level entrepreneurs and just folks that are starting out, they all go through a variation of this problem, and this video will solve it, hopefully, for good, right? So take pen and paper and see how we normally coach our clients to finish what they start. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be very big, can be very small, can be like a minor task, can be a big project that takes months, doesn't matter. This framework works at all levels because performance is fractal. What works at the minor level works at the macro level. If you're new to the channel, I'm Castillo, founder of Selfmastered, Executive Performance Academy for entrepreneurs. We help entrepreneurs scale with peak focus, clarity, and discipline. So first of all, let's ask ourselves why we don't finish what we start. What magical thing happens in our brain that we start working on something, oftentimes we don't even start, and we don't complete it? Well, this happens because we mismanage our mind. Mental mismanagement is not knowing how to deal with these subconscious urges of our mind when we're tasked with a work that we dread. First, how this not finishing what you start actually manifests. So we have several modalities of this problem. The first and very typical is procrastination. So procrastination is when you don't even start what you know you have to do. When you dread the task so much that we keep finding all the things to do that are easier, more pleasurable, more immediate, instead of actually committing on doing the hard thing. This is the most typical that affects most people. You can also have perfectionism. So perfectionism is having such high standards for the task or the project that you never actually complete it. So you may start, so you're not procrastinating, but you don't finish it. You are suffering from perfectionism because you don't want to feel the sting of not doing something good enough. But also, you can have self-doubt. So self-doubt is when in the middle of the project or in the middle of the task, you pay attention to this voice in your head that tells you that you're not good for that this is not something you should be doing, that you're just not going to do a good work at all. So you end up abandoning it. And finally, you have plain all good distractions. So this day and age, everybody's pretty much very distracted. Their brains are wired for distractions. So sometimes you don't finish what you start because, something pops into your mind or you start paying attention to things that don't need your attention and you eventually get distracted. So it's either procrastination, perfectionism. So procrastination, you don't start. Perfectionism, you don't finish. Self-doubt, you quit midway, or just because you don't trust your ability to get it done, or distractions, you quit midway because something that excites your dopamine system feels more relevant to you at that moment, right? So this is the 4 manifestations that I've seen over my career that are more typical of those that do not finish what we start. And let me be clear, this happens to all of us, right? It's all a function of our subconscious that we're going to be discussing in a minute. So there's no shame about not finishing what we start sometimes, but there's shame of not doing something about it. And this is what this video is about. Now, how do we solve this, right? We're going to be focusing on the things that are psychologically related, because distractions is mostly neurological. Distraction is not having a brain that is primed for sustaining attention. So that is mostly a neurological problem. We're going to be focusing on the psychological problems, right? So procrastination, perfectionism, and self-doubt. And before we go into diagnosing exactly what is the root cause of all of this, we have to understand, how does human psychology work? Why do we do what we do? Why do we chase a goal? There's basically two motivators. At the root, there's two core motivators, is to approach and avoid. That's basically the two things that affect that we use to make decisions. We approach the good and we avoid the bad. Now, this avoiding is more powerful than approaching. We naturally, since we have a survival mechanism built in the brain, we are more naturally prone to avoid doing the bad things than to naturally approach doing the good things. But at the root, this is the true motivators of the human psyche. It's always approach or avoid. We do something because we want it or because we want to escape from something we don't want. And typically the negative is more powerful. So if we're going to be finishing what we start at every time that we set out on a task or a project that we're not naturally wired to do, we need to increase the approach factor and we need to decrease the avoid factor. The more we look forward to the task, the easier it is to complete it. The less we dread the task, the easier it is to also complete it, right? Very easy. How do we do this? Well, these two motivators work in a different way. There's two mechanisms for this. But at the root, what we need to solve, right, performance problems and not finishing what you start is a typical performance problem. Performance problems are a mismatch between conscious and subconscious. There's a fight every time you do not complete what you start, every time you're not up to the standard you set for yourself, every time you doubt yourself. It's always because there's a lingering conflict between your conscious and your subconscious. And it's very important to understand that this is perfectly solvable with so at the root, performance problems are a mismatch between the conscious and the subconscious. Every time we want to do something we don't believe we can achieve, or we don't believe it's worth it, we are going to self-sabotage. We are going to create a condition for us to not complete the work. So at the root, what we are solving is this mismatch that happens when we are faced with tasks we don't inherently look forward to. And we don't look forward to because the avoidance factor is too high. There's subconscious patterns or tendencies or inclinations are moving us away from the task. And these patterns are typically rooted in fear. It's either fear of failure. This is when you don't do something because you subconsciously don't feel like you are going to be doing a good job. So you are avoiding the potential damage that it creates in your life. You are creating a fake scenario that tells you you are not good enough for this, so you will fail. This is the most typical. Then we got fear of success. So this is also a big one. Fear of success is when you don't subconsciously want the success you consciously say you do. Let me explain. Everybody wants to be successful. But success has a different connotation for everybody. And for some people, and this used to be me in the past, I would think that success implied a lot of hard work, implied a lot of friction, implied a lot of stress, implied a lot of commitments, a lack of freedom to do what I wanted to do. So I subconsciously fear becoming successful in business, which is what led to my self-sabotage years ago. So I did not fear screwing it, I fear actually becoming successful at it. And this really is a subtle but very dangerous force that prevents entrepreneurs sometimes for doing what they want. Another big fear is fear of criticism. We are social animals, and we want to be loved and accepted. And sometimes we will refrain from finishing what we start because we don't want to be faced with the criticism that may arise from people that we have a good opinion on, or we value their opinion over our own. So it's not even failure or success. We know we can do it, and we're ready to get the success that we know will ensure. But we're not ready to deal with what other people will say about what we achieve. And this is very common for those folks that are, doing something that is totally different from any of their peers. That they have this, when they're in an environment that has this crab in a bucket mentality that doesn't allow for someone to shine bright and do something different. This is very typical. This is what really keeps some people down. And then a fourth fear, and this is also very subtle, is fear of not it being worth it. So being a waste of time. Sometimes we just don't finish what we start because we're not intimately convinced that this is going to lead anywhere. The problem is that we are already creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we're not super focused on making it worth it, chances are that we're not going to make the effort to actually make it worth it. Does that make sense? So if we fear of it not being worth it, if it's a waste of time, we do not even finish it. This is the four fears that I've identified as the typical that manifest when we don't finish what we start. And eventually everything revolves around this conscious and subconscious mismatch. We do something, we commit on doing something, but we subconsciously feel we are going to fail. So we don't finish it. Or we subconsciously feel that we don't want to be successful because it's just too much work. And that's also a false assumption. Or we fear that criticism is going to get us. Or we fear that it's just not being worth it. These four fears is what stop people dead on their tracks. And again, as I said, this can happen when you're starting out or when you're at 8 figures. It doesn't matter. I've seen it all. It's always the same pattern. At 8 figures, not finishing one start has normally to do with signing a strategic partnership, signing big deals. The kind of things that can really alter the course of an 8-figure business. But for whatever reason, the entrepreneur feels that it's just not worth it of that deal, or doesn't want to deal with the hassle of being successful, or doesn't want to deal with whatever it is that other people will say. So this is the performance problem that arises from this mismatch, conscious and subconscious, that is always rooted in fear. How do you solve it? Well, we have to increase the approach factor, and we have to decrease the avoid factor. Remember, there's always approach and avoid. So we decrease the avoid factor and we increase the approach. How do we do this? Glad you asked. The approach factor ties down to identity. This is identity work and self-programming. this is very advanced, but it is so powerful that I'll let you in this little secret. So when you approach something, it's because you inherently look forward to it. You want it. Why would you want something? Because you believe it belongs to you or a future and better version of yourself. In other words, your identity is part of the approaching mechanism, because you want something because you feel belongs to you or whoever you want to become. So a good idea is to always tie your identity into every task that you are involved in, no matter how small that task is, especially those that you dread the most. The things that you least want to do are those that benefit the most from tying that to your identity. For instance, let's say that you don't like to write, right? You hate writing, and you see yourself as an entrepreneur, and you have to do marketing in order to market your business. But you understand that writing is thinking. The more you write about your business, the better you will think. The better you think, the better marketing material you can create. And therefore, the more your business will grow. See how this works? So instead of thinking, I hate writing, right? I don't like it, I'm an entrepreneur. You said, I absolutely love writing. Why? Because it is part of my identity as an entrepreneur. You find a way of reframing the activity so that it becomes a natural part of the identity you're building towards. If this is the case, assuming this is example, you probably didn't sign up for becoming a writer, but social media and the nature of the internet, every company now is a media company. You need to create content in order to attract viewers. So if you do not accept that writing content implies learning how to write, well, you're going to have a hard time growing your business. Instead of fighting reality, you adapt to reality, and you create a new understanding of a task you dread by linking it to your identity. And this is step number one. Step number two is that you self-program. And this is we do it normally through self-hypnosis. This is an advanced protocol that we teach our clients. Of course, if you want to know how elite entrepreneurs become elite, book a call with us. We will help you do this naturally so you always finish where you start. Self-hypnosis has to do with reprogramming your subconscious at the deepest level. So if you are sending commands to your subconscious when you are most susceptible, over time, the mismatch between the conscious and the subconscious will narrow. There will not be as much conflict between what you say you were going to do and what you eventually end up doing, because you will inherently believe that what you're doing is actually meaningful. There's no much fear once you internalize that it is in your own nature, in your own identity to do these kinds of things. So this is a very powerful way to increase the approach factor. You approach the things that you know will help you grow, that are going to build your identity. That is the approach factor. Now, how do we increase the avoid factor? Because we can still think that we don't like writing, right? Who likes writing? Not even writers. In fact, there's this quote by Thomas Mann, which is a famous Austrian writer in the beginning of the century, that says, a writer is someone for whom writing is most difficult. I'm paraphrasing. But it's funny because writing is not something anyone likes to do. By the way, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann is probably one of the best books I've ever read, if probably like top 3 in my life. So I highly recommend it, especially if you want to understand European thinking at the beginning of the 20th century. Absolutely brilliant book, absolutely fantastic book. So how do you avoid it? Well, in essence, what you need to reduce is fear. How do you reduce fear? By reducing the challenge. So let's say that we're talking about writing, and every day you need to write for 90 minutes. Let's say the 90 minutes is the goal that you've set. Well, instead of thinking about this 90 minutes, chunk the task. This is the strategy, chunking. Chunk the task into small parts, small bits that are easier to swallow. So instead of thinking about the 90 minutes, you think about the first 5 minutes, or the couple minutes, or the first 10 minutes. You decrease the challenge so that the fear of failure is reduced. So you do not dread going to a 90-minute work session. You just need to show up and get to the first couple minutes, the first 10 minutes. Chunking is a great strategy for reducing the perceived threat of the task, because it's all about survival in the end. Your brain, your mind, subconsciously wants to keep you alive. So the task you don't necessarily like to do, the discomfort that you're going through is not something that is pleasurable, which is why you avoid it. So if you reduce the chunking, if you reduce the task by chunking, guess what? There's not that much of a threat that you need to battle. Now, something that also helps a lot is setting forcing functions. This is very important. So forcing function, or Ulysses Pact, it is a mechanism in behavioral science by which you commit to doing something. You purposefully tie your identity to do something. Say, I'm going to be writing every single day at 9 a.m. Come hell or high water, I'm going to commit to doing it. And since you committed, since your set of identity is tied to the behavior, you just do it. So you can say, all right, cool, so I have 90 minutes to write in the morning. Let's say you start at 9. So you chunk it down, so the thing you're looking forward is the first 10 minutes, and you purposefully create a forcing function in which you say, my identity is one of an entrepreneur, remember, that needs to write in order to grow their business, for all the marketing reasons we outlined, and I'm going to be doing this every single day, and you create a condition. Or a very typical one is, I give money to someone I hate, for instance, right? That is a forcing function. You are creating a condition by which you are naturally gravitating towards something. You are transforming and avoiding into an approaching. And the final thing, so we have number 2 is forcing functions. Number 1 is chunking. The first thing is to celebrate. This is a huge one, especially for elite performers, high achievers, top performers. We normally do not celebrate that well because we tend to believe that excellence is just the way we are. It is what is expected from us. So we never really take the time to celebrate the good deeds that we've done. So instead, in this specific case, 90 minutes, if at the end of the 90 minutes, we have no way of celebrating the fact that we actually did a 90-minute session, we do not, create some sort of thing you're looking forward to. I have a video on dopamine management, by the way. I'll link it here because it ties very well into this video. If we don't know, if you don't have anything to look forward to, why would we repeat this? Why would we go through the same discomfort if there's no prize at the end? Instead of just relying on willpower, which eventually runs out, we create some sort of reward. A reward that helps us lock in this behavior. For me, is a rest and recovery session, and is also a chocolate bar. I really like that chocolate bar, and I don't want to go without it. So if I want to eat that chocolate bar, guess what? I need to first have written, this is how you do it, right? So approach and avoid. Approach factor is always a function of identity. You do the things because they belong to you. One of us do things like this. So you tie the thing you dread the most into the natural thing that someone like you would do. And if this is not easy to do in the beginning, because let's say back to this example of writing and entrepreneurship, you just find a way of reframing it. If you want to do marketing, the better you think, the better marketing you'll do. So there's really no choice. So reframe it so that writing is a core competency of being an entrepreneur. Boom, there you got it. And this is how you tie your identity. Identity is also very important for the forcing function. When we create a commitment, a pact with ourselves to do something, because that is just who we are. That is an identity thing. Then when we want to reduce the avoidance factor, first we chunk, so we reduce the challenge so that we don't look to the 90-minute work session, we just look to the 10-minute work session or 2-minute work session. And then at the end of the 2 minutes, then we have another 2 minutes, and then I have another 2 minutes until we have got to 90 minutes. Cool? And at the end, we celebrate. We have milestones. We let our brain know that we did a good thing by having a reward, by having something to look forward to, right? Deploying this into your workday is going to help you achieve so much more that you just go about your day without a clear plan, without a clear understanding of your own psychology at work, without knowing how to motivate yourself and create an identity that actually delivers on the promises you made to yourself. This is the stuff that transforms average entrepreneurs into elite entrepreneurs. It's not how hard you work, how talented you are, how much is your IQ. That doesn't matter. What matters is your performance. And a core part of your performance is having a mind that works for you, not against you. And the mind is a tool that you can program if you know how to do it. In fact, that's what we teach our clients to. So if you want to become an absolute rock star, book a call with us. We can make you at least 3 times more productive by training and conditioning your mind for peak performance. And if you want to go deep into what is my specific protocol to manipulate my dopamine to get more motivation, click this video and it's going to tell you exactly everything you need to know to start doing this effectively in your workday. Until next time.